Good morning and welcome to our Monday, March 13th, 2023 strategic planning meeting. Let the record reflect that we have Commissioner Kearns and Commissioner Jordan and Commissioner Waldrop and Cutie in the conference room, and Commissioner French is on Zoom. So, and then we have our executive management team and then people that will be presenting as we move along the agenda. So we're going to start off with Mike Burgess.
Morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
Ready to go?
We're ready.
Okay. Similar to what we did last week, just going to update you on bills that we've been talking about that we focused on. Have one other item to relay to you at the end. But other than that, I'll just start running through the list. That sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. House Bill 1050, that's the apprenticeship utilization bill. You'll remember that I reported to you last week that when it came off the House floor, it had been reduced to the general contractors only, so it narrowed the scope of the bill, which I've been told makes it a little more palatable, but it is still an issue for the public entities involved and some of the contracting community. The bill has a hearing this morning at 10:30. The next bill, this is the RAP Act. It ultimately did not make it out of the House. There was some drama with that bill. I think I told you that was probably one of the most heavily lobbied bills of the entire session. There was at least 30 or 40 different lobbyists working on that bill for different reasons. There was an attempt to amend it, to narrow it down, to remember, I think we had talked about, it was almost like 4 bills in one. It was going to go, the amendment would have taken it down to just a recycled content bill, at which point I was told the proponents said, okay, we'll be back next year and try again. I do anticipate, or I guess it could be argued that there is some fiscal impact with this bill. If I were a proponent, I wouldn't try to walk away from it yet. I'd keep trying. There's other angles. You can try to reference things in the budget and whatnot. So I'm not saying it's completely gone for the session, but it's in trouble at the least. And just continue to have to monitor that and see where it ends up as session goes forward. House Bill 1181, that is the bill that deals with the GMA and a climate element. It has a hearing later this week. Later this morning at 10 o'clock, I'll be meeting with Senator Short and some of your staff about this issue that we've been working on surrounding the capital facilities plan. So still working on that angle as the bill moves through the process. The next one, 1363, that's this House version of the vehicular pursuit bill. The House version did not move, but you likely read that the Senate version did. On Wednesday, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, there were enough senators that came together that they did a procedural motion and they relieved the bill from committee. That's pretty rare. It's kind of a big deal when that happens in Olympia. But there was enough of a deal made that enough folks in both parties were supportive of it and wanted to move the bill out of the Senate, given the indications were that the House bill would not move. What's in the bill, and you'll have to forgive me because I am not a legal expert, but as I understand it, vehicular pursuits are allowed, or the law enforcement is allowed to do pursuits under certain circumstances, and those, in the simplest forms, it's been explained to me, deal with the threat of bodily harm or injury. There were attempts on the floor to amend in, allow pursuits for things like car theft and a couple other things happening that did not hang. But as I understand it, it's primarily focused on police are able to do pursuit when folks are in danger. That's probably a very gross oversimplification of it. But that's kind of where it is now. It was referred to the Senate version was referred to the Law and Justice Committee. And so we'll have to see if that bill receives consideration on the House side, the Senate version. The next one, the DNR land bill, that's at 1460. Bill has a hearing on the 16th. I'll sign in pro for your position. The next one, the behavioral health contracts bill, also will sign in pro, has a hearing also on the 16th. The state broadband map bill is moving as well, has a hearing in the Senate committee on the 17th. The last one at the bottom, 5057, this is the bill that dealt with the energy standards in your buildings in the attempt to get at a work group to look at the cost drivers and maybe some potential for relief. That bill unfortunately did not pass, but I know there are efforts to work that on the budget side, that maybe there's the ability to do some sort of a work group or study group to come back and make recommendations to the legislature. I don't know that that will be successful, but just letting you know that there is still some work done on another avenue for that. Going to the next page, Senate Bill 5059. That is the prejudgment interest bill. We have concerns about that one for cost increases for the county. It did not move from committee. It's still sitting there, but it does have fiscal impacts. That's the kind of thing that might pop up. Session continues to go, so we'll monitor that. The next one, 5198, and it's House Companion 1129. This is the bill that had the potential to impact the Air Force Base, the mobile home issues around the Air Force Base. Our language was included that virtually exempts the county from the bill. It stayed in as the bill passed the Senate floor. So it has a hearing in the House committee today, but I'll continue to monitor that to make sure that the language we need in the bill stays there. The next one is the condo liability bill. It did have a hearing last week after cutoff, but that's because it does have a fiscal impact. I think I had sent you all the fiscal note. If you read that, that explains why. But it does have a general fund impact. Therefore, it did not need to pass. So it could be part of the budget or assumed in the budget. We talked about the vehicular pursuit bill already. The PCB bill has its hearing today at 1:30 in the House Environment Committee. And I think I had Rob Lindsay sign in favor of that bill. The competency evaluation bill, as you'll recall, we talked about that. It's much more permissive, not as impactful as it was when it first was introduced. The bill has its hearing on the 14th in the House, and then the last two, the first of the last two, they're the controlled substances bill. That's the one that passed the Senate that deals with the Blake decision. Does not have a hearing scheduled yet in the House, but did pass the Senate. I think we had talked about that one last week. I think it had passed before we talked last week. And then the county commissioner salary bill. It does have a hearing tomorrow. I should have mentioned that we will be in committee for the next couple weeks. You're going through the standard committee process, while all the while the folks that are in charge of the budgets are putting the finishing touches on those. I think someone told me that the next revenue forecast, I want to say, is on the 20th, if that's not a weekend. Yeah. So the 20th, that looks to be a Monday. I would expect to see the budgets. I guess that would be next week. I fell behind a week. But anyway, indications are we'll see the budgets in the next week or two. And we will certainly spend time reacting to those. The one other item I wanted to add on, Commissioner French, your staff had reached out to me about the mobile home parks. I think what the question was about funding, and I don't know about funding until we see the budgets. I was wondering though too if maybe that question centered around that Senate Bill 5198 and protecting the Air Force Base, Commissioner. So to clarify, I figured I'd just ask you when I saw you this morning.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner French.
Yeah, so we did put in a funding request, and this is basically a continuation of the effort to try and acquire the mobile home parks and protect Fairchild Air Force Base and stuff. So there's two-prong approach here. One, making sure that the House bill that affects mobile homes excluded Fairchild, because that's a statewide initiative. And then the second part of it is to provide the continued funding. We've already used the first phase of funding that they provided to provide the housing to relocate people into. Now we need the funding to be able to actually acquire the mobile home park. So it is a continuation of the same effort to protect Fairchild.
Yep. And so then, Commissioner, so as I mentioned, we're protected in the policy bill, and then we'll wait and see what the budgets say here when we see them. Like I said, probably next week.
Thank you.
It'll probably be after we talk next week. So
Yeah.
2 weeks from Monday, we'll be discussing the budget, but I'll send you all via email. I'll send you all information, but we'll talk about that this next Monday.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, the funding request was through us, the Spokane County, through the capital budget process. Is that correct, Commissioner French?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Mike, or Mike, do you have more?
No, that's it. I mean, this is kind of be the way it is. Not a lot of new topics as things, start to funnel down as we get to different cutoffs.
Okay. Okay. So, and you were saying, yeah, I've heard the budget comes out middle of next week. So
Yeah.
did you expect it on Monday or just sometime
No,
next
it wouldn't be. Like I said, they usually do the revenue forecast and then wait a couple days after that. So I would expect middle of the week.
Okay.
I've heard the 22nd before, but they always change it, within a couple days. So sometime next week.
Okay. Commissioner French, I see you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Last week, we heard initial projection is going to show that the revenue projection is going to be down about 250 million. And so haven't heard any additional updates since last week. So, hopefully the update I got last week is inaccurate. They're going to be having money falling out of their pockets. But it was pretty gloomy when they gave me the projection. So I'm not overly optimistic.
Yeah, you'll remember, commissioners, when we talked in the late fall, there was like the forecasts over the last 5-6 years have always exceeded what the previous forecast was. There was always growth. There was one in the late fall or late summer that was a decrease in the increase, if that makes sense. But then after that, it bounced back up and was increasing again. So I've heard the same rumors, Commissioner, that you've heard, that we'll start to see a decline. I mean, obviously the state's revenue and maybe your own revenues follow, what's going on in the world. And I'm reading things about banks last week and different things like that, where I think there's a lot of concern about what's going to happen with the economy here going forward. And obviously that will be reflected in the budget and revenue. I'd imagine next session in particular, we'll be looking at potential for cuts and things like that, if that happens.
Okay, so and Mike, I think we're going to have you stay with us because we're going to talk about the legislative strategy for planning and capital facilities. So Scott Chesney wants to discuss
Perfect.
that.
Very good. Yeah, perfect. I'm going to mute myself then. Great.
Okay, so if you'll stay on and be with us. So Scott, I'll let you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we are back both as an update and also to give you some new information and talk about a little bit of an enhanced strategy. Mike alluded to it earlier, but as a reminder, we're here really for two reasons. And the big part is the capital facilities plan is an integral element of the comprehensive plan amendments, and pretty much everything we do has to be accounted for one way or another in that capital facilities plan. That was found deficient in 2013, 2016, which led to the part of it, which led to the settlement agreement with FutureWise that we were trying to remedy this past couple of years. The two ambiguities in there are no clear definition of what a capital facility is, which is obviously a little bit of a challenge. And then the second part, giving or holding the county responsible for special districts, schools, water districts, fire districts, of which the county has no control. These districts do not plan using GMA tools, and most of them do not produce a traditional capital facilities plan or program at all. And so they're very hard to get their future-looking information into our capital facilities program. You authorized us earlier to pursue a legislative solution. We have been moving down that path, and Jessica's going to talk about that here in just a second. We have a meeting this morning with Senator Short We're still working on other senators from the district. Obviously, if this is going to move in the current legislature, we're going to have Democratic or at least bipartisan support to move this into the process. There's in the Bill 1181, generally called the Climate Bill, there has been some movement to help our situation by adding capital facilities by name into the utilities part of that, not the capital facility, but the utilities part. And also some language is in that bill that says if you are working with these special districts in a good faith effort and cannot reconcile that the county or the city would not be held out of compliance after a good faith effort of doing it and simply couldn't produce that. We're trying to replicate that language more or less into the capital facilities element of the same bill. It's just they're adjacent paragraphs. I think I'll turn it over to Jessica for the details.
Sure. So we originally, we met with the commissioners and attempted, like Scott said, to both clarify what the definition of a capital facility was, so kind of put bookends on it, and then also, like Scott mentioned, include that basically exception for capital facilities or utilities that we don't own or control. Like Scott mentioned, we did get some traction in the exception, and insofar as clarifying certain utilities, mainly it was stormwater, drinking water, and wastewater were explicitly called out and moved to utilities. So those used to be traditionally considered a capital facility. That's where we would address them. But instead, to clarify those, they moved them to the utilities element and then made an exception for any of those that weren't controlled by counties or cities. What we're hoping, we continue to hope for, is more clarity for still what is left for capital facilities. What are we supposed to include there? And the main reason for that is it just creates a lot of confusion, and we're not alone. King County actually saw our proposed language to clarify the definition, and they shared our concerns, and we actually had a great meeting with them. And they added some additional language to what our concerns were and clarified some things. And they're also trying to work their end of things and get some bipartisan support to clarify that. However, at this stage, it's probably unlikely that we'll see any clarifying language this year. So what we're hoping for as kind of a fallback is just to include the exception language that's now been included, which was our original language, and included in the utility section, and just also include that in the capital facility section. So we are meeting with Senator Short to try to get that, but we would like some Democratic support as well. So if anyone can help us talk to a senator on that so we can get this bipartisan support, that would help us primarily, Spokane County specifically, with fire districts and schools. That's what's left, at least in the capital facilities element, which we aren't able to get because they don't plan, and we have tried to work with them. They don't plan within the GMA, so they don't have the same one. So that would help us at least for this year. And then we are still continuing the parallel track. Our petition for review is still pending at the Supreme Court. It's not passed yet, or it's not been accepted yet this month. So next month we'll see if they take it up. But that's kind of where we're at, and we're hoping, again, if anyone can assist us in bipartisan support. Or
one key part that Jessica just alluded to is King County was really helpful in joining this effort with us. So it's not just an East Side effort. We've got them involved. Also, the American Planning Association's Washington legislative chapter has added this, or early on added this to their legislative priorities. So in my world, the other planners in other counties are seeing the same risks coming their way if their own capital facilities plans are challenged. So this is not a partisan issue in any factor. It's a clarity issue more than anything else. But because those CFPs are so integral to capital or to comprehensive planning and land use and development, we really have to resolve this ambiguity. Because the reminder is a really harsh one. If you cannot document that you have capital facilities able to support the development areas that you have in your urban growth areas, you have two choices. You either contribute enough money to fix that capital facilities plan to support the development, or you on your map, you must cut back your urban growth areas to where you can afford to do that. Neither of which is a particularly alluring development for Spokane County, and the other counties are seeing this as well. So we're hopeful that we can at least get this language into the Senate, an amendment on the Senate bill, and get this thing forward for this year, and we'll keep working on it in the next session.
Thank you. Mike, any thoughts that you have? And I guess has Wasack picked this up? The
Yes.
other counties?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner, I talked to, in fact, my colleague that Jessica's, that we've talked with before about amendments. So, Paul Jewell. So we've talked to Paul about it. He's aware of what we're doing. He's been in contact with me like the last 8 weeks about this when it first came up. So they're supportive of what we're doing. And Scott makes a good point. We do want to, try to drum up some other support, both sides of the aisle for something like this. So there are parallel efforts going on to what we're trying to do, talking directly to the delegation. Paul's working on it as well, in his role, kind of representing all of the counties.
Commissioner French, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I just wanted, this topic I did raise with LSC probably about a month and a half ago, and it was like an aha moment. It seems like we seem to be on the cutting edge for a lot of challenges with the Growth Management Act, but it was amazing to me how many counties have already got approved capital facilities plans and updated comp plans, and yet don't include anything from the special purpose district for the same reasons that Jessica and Scott articulated and stuff. But I do know that Paul has been working on it, and that it has been raised at LSC. So hopefully we'll make some progress.
Could you share the latest language
Sure,
with the
yeah.
full board? And then, did the judge's ruling in that case at the end of last year, did it specifically say that the county was accountable for the other special districts planning? Or is it just, it was not clear if we were or we weren't?
It said that we had limited accountability, so we needed to include the first terms. We had to do the inventory of existing capital facilities owned by them, showing the locations and capacities of the capital facilities, and then we had to demonstrate a forecast of future needs. We did not have to do the proposed locations and capacities of expanded or new capital facilities or their 6-year plan. It's still, the issue that we've had is even coming up with an inventory sometimes of where all of the facilities are. Oftentimes, especially with water districts, we found that they don't have detailed plans. And then with schools, where we ran into an issue was the capacities, because a capacity has to be dependent upon a set level of service. And our school districts did not have a set level of service, so they couldn't tell us the capacities, or if they could, they weren't sharing them. So we couldn't even meet the limited defined terms that the courts required of us, at least with those. And then fire districts as well. They also didn't have a set level of service or capacity, so to speak. They had things they wanted, but they didn't have anything specific like that.
I'll take a look at this, so thank you. One question I had, it seems pretty clear that there's a need to clarify that definition, right? I think the question I have is, what is the new definition that we're proposing? So can you just summarize if you have kind of reached agreement with King County on what that new definition of the capital facility should be and how it relates to the old WAC definition, which I recall from our
Yes.
conversations seemed to be pretty good. I'm
Yes.
curious where that definition stands.
Yes, so the first page is actually what we came up with King County. It has some of their contributions too. For example, the first area in blue, that's a King County addition because they were recently challenged on that, and that was the ability to incorporate language, incorporate capital facilities plans outside of your own and without having to set them forth fully in your own document. So that's from King County, but so is the remainder of the language. So that was what King County and we came up with jointly. And it's very much the same as what I had handed out earlier. It basically goes through and has a multi-part test, and that multi-part test has links to the entire Growth Management Act, both the historical analysis and all the other sections. So it's basically just has to be a physical facility fixed in location. It's determined by the county or city that it's necessary to support new development and is directly responsible for the delivery of and meeting an established or necessary service. And then it does include the following capital facilities at a minimum have to be gathered, and that is fire suppression and schools within the urban growth areas, and also park and recreation facilities. And then I think they don't include them for outside. Yeah, there aren't any minimum for outside in the urban areas. And then it includes the WAC section under that subsection C, but that says basically we can include more, including jail and courts and offices, but we're not required to include them. And then it has the exception. And the reason for that is, recall that there's a smaller list in this section now, the proposed language, because that has been removed and called out in the utilities element now for the water, sewer. So the utility section includes, let's see, I think it's, yeah, drinking water, stormwater, wastewater, electrical, telecommunications, and natural gas systems. So a lot of those we originally wanted to list as a minimum, and so did the WAC in the capital facilities element, but now that they were included in the utilities element, that's where they would be handled. And so all you'd be left with is basically schools and fire districts, neither of which we own. So, and then anything else you want to include, you could, you just wouldn't be mandated to include it. So I think that's where we're at this point.
And was this the King County Planning Department that you're working with this on, or who?
It was,
King County?
it was their planner, and then Darren Carnell, who is the King County equivalent to me in their county. And then they have a government liaison who was also there. And I apologize, I cannot recall
I don't remember the name either.
the name. So that's who we were working with. And I know that they were working on their end, and we've kept them updated on our endeavor to find bipartisan support for the clarification. And it really just comes down to a time and effort thing. We just want to make sure that we're placing our money and our staff time in meeting what the GMA requires us to meet, instead of trying to throw everything in there and not guessing what's in there. That's really what we want.
And has there been any, I know we talked about this earlier, I don't know what the latest thinking is, any on the good faith effort piece, which is separate, right?
Yes.
Then what is the definition?
Yes.
Has there been any thought to requiring the special districts to respond, things like that? Alternative ways to go about it other than the good faith effort?
Absolutely, and this is one of my colleagues' favorite things to deal with, because it was in the original Growth Management Act and then stricken through a veto. And one of our earlier amendment suggestions is put it back, because everything in there, and delete the port districts that caused the heartburn, but all the other special districts back that would put them into the GMA mix, and then this whole thing would go away.
And we were basically told that it would be all but impossible to get that passed, because the lobbying groups are so powerful with the utility districts. So unless I've mistaken that, but that's kind of where we were told it was probably a non-starter.
Well, for me, you're asking for bipartisan support.
Exactly.
So I'll take a look at this. I'm really in favor of clarifying the language. It's just, what is that and how does it relate to
Yes.
previous practice? Just transparently, I think the concern may be a kind of sense that we're gutting the GMA, right? So that's what I just want to understand better with the current language.
Yes, absolutely. We would appreciate the feedback, because obviously if we're going to get bipartisan support, we don't want that to be the perception. So it's not the intent.
Well, it is not the intent whatsoever. GMA has enough ambiguities all through 3678, and this is a self-inflicted wound because of that original 1990 veto. So in one way, we're simply trying to put back the very accountability that GMA anticipated in those days. And the secondary part is, well, if that's one hurdle too many, at least give us a definition and the ability to work with these other areas that don't plan under GMA rules, but if they cannot produce the information we need, then the county shouldn't be held accountable.
So I see Commissioner French has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this current structure is not unique to Spokane County, but even here, the city of Spokane will be impacted by this language as well when they go to update their comp plan, because the city of Spokane requires or relies on fire districts 8, 3, 9, and 10 to provide mutual support. And because they rely on that to meet their concurrency requirements, they could also be requiring a capital facilities plan from the same fire districts that we are and having a challenge getting and stuff. So it's not just the county, it will be the city as well that will be impacted by this current language.
Thank you very much for presenting.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Mike, for joining us, and we will see you next week. That will then take us to the art part, Mr. Crowther.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, commissioners. We have a short PowerPoint for these two agenda items.
You do, okay, and then I'm either gonna have you sit here or at the
Oh,
table,
sure.
so you
Okay.
can receive
Thank you.
on the,
Oh, very good. Okay. So over the years, since about 2014, the airport board, with approval of the county and the city, has sold several hundred acres of surplus property. And that has obviously helped us to raise funds to help support our capital program. As we always like to say, we're financially self-sufficient. So everything that we do in terms of our grant-funded or non-grant funded capital programs, we either provide the matching funds for the grants or we fund the non-grant eligible projects straight from proceeds, such as land sales. So these two transactions are the 11th and 12th since about 2014, just to give some background and context to the land sales. Next slide, please, Ron. So we have two land sales that we are asking for approval today. The first is a land sale to AT Acquisitions. And again, for purposes of history, this would be the third sale, the third transaction with AT Acquisitions. And this location, as you can see, is just west of the intersection of Hayford and McFarlane. And you can see the large vehicle U-Pullet facility is next to this property to the east. So we had sold previously with, again, approval of the city and the county, what we call McFarlane 1.0, which you can see it was developed for a last mile facility for Amazon. They are currently building another facility on what we call McFarlane 2.0, which was land that was previously sold. And now we have the third transaction, which you can see involves about a 4-acre parcel that's located directly on McFarlane Road, and then about a 12-acre parcel located to the east of what we call McFarlane 2.0. Next slide, please. This is a little bit closer in view of the two parcels, just so you can orient. North is to the left of the screen in this section. Next slide, please. Just to let you know, we had the property appraised. So all the property that we have is fair market value. We have to get fair market value based on FAA regulation. And next slide, please. So the property, as I mentioned, will be created by short plat through the city. The FAA land release is complete. The appraised value is $1.65 for parcel B and $2 for parcel C for $1.149,961.35. Review period has expired. No conditions were rejected in the review period, and then there's an entitlement period, and then 6-month extensions if they wish that they have to pay us for. Navigation easement will be recorded over the property and no broker involved in the transaction. Happy to answer any questions. Okay.
I think you're good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slides, we'll go to the next transaction, which is purchase and sale agreement for the sale of land about 11.954 acres off of Flightline Boulevard. Next slide. So just to orient you, this is a pretty good aerial photo here where this property is located. Here's the Geiger Boulevard that was recently improved through a raise grant with the county. This is the Geiger interchange, which then there's a roundabout that goes into Flightline. You can see this property is located roughly between Flightline and Pilot Drive with frontage along Geiger Boulevard. Next slide, please, John. So this is just a more formal depiction of the lot that will be created for the property. And you can see on this lot, this was property, 20 acres that was sold to King Beverage, which is across the street, which Mr. Rusnak is a partner in King Beverage. So there's an interest in, obviously, property around their location that they previously purchased from the airport board. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of what the property is going to be used for, just as AT will build a warehouse product, the proposed use of this property is for a truck plaza, which is really needed. There is a statewide shortage of truck parking in our across the state and in our community as well. So having truck plaza services in relationship to all of the development that's going on in and around the airport is actually a really important and productive use of the property. Next slide, please. This is just a little bit better look at what that proposed layout is. There'll be a convenience store, there'll be washing facilities, overnight parking, restrooms, showers, and even a truck wash facility as well. There's also plans in the upper right area that you see here for some type of a retail food and beverage type of use here as well, which actually is needed in that area also. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, the request is to sell 11.954 acres at 6801 Flightline Boulevard. The purchase price is $4.74 per square feet, which renders $2,468,194.98. And there are a number of conditions. The review period has expired without any exceptions taken. And we are in the process of completing the FAA land release. There's two steps to that. The first step's been completed. The second step will be the release of the property from the Surplus Property Act limitations. The folks, Rusnak will reimburse us for the segregation plan costs and fees, navigation easement to be recorded over the property, and in this case, there was a broker involved, and we'll be paying a brokerage fee of 5.25%. It's about $129,000. Any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions from
Okay.
anyone.
All right.
Very good, thank you.
Madam Chair.
So we may have you, I guess we're seeing if Scott's asking if we can move item G regarding the bond briefing for SIA up, so that way you guys can be able to get on your.
Thanks, Scott. It's very
So-
nice of you.
As much as you'd love to hear all the
Yeah.
other items.
Now they're all
Stick
my
around.
names. I was down at the other end of the
Yes.
table.
So that's gonna delay a few of our other briefings for a moment. So are you okay with that, Matt, if we push you a little bit? Okay. So Randy, who wants
Yes.
to do like the
I've
table or?
just, Deanna and Roy are just gonna sit on the sides and help me answer any questions if you have any. Okay.
Sounds good.
I just wanted to let you know the process we're in. We did basically do a rewrite. Originally, we were looking at one document. We've now split that into two. So what we're currently drafted and the airport is reviewing is a master bond resolution. This resolution not only addresses revenue bonds, but other types of financings. This is a great time to do it because there is no debt currently with the airport. And so the thought is we put this in place for future possibilities of debt that they may want to issue in the future, since we have no bondholders that we need to get consent from. So one, we're looking at a master bond resolution. Some things in this bond resolution, one of the big things on it also is it does not permit the city to terminate our interlocal agreement with the county so long as there are bonds outstanding. One of the big pieces in that document that created the airport with the city was that if one of the parties wants to get out, you have the clock starts ticking, and whoever decided that wanted to get out would actually end up with the assets. And so we want to make sure that the city can't do that. If there are bonds, we need to make sure we're protecting the county and that we don't lose assets on that part. The other thing we did put in this document was that if the airport board ever did have the authority to go out on their own, they would need to defease the county's bonds. So that's the master bond resolution. And then, of course, we are also, the other document in there is the revenue bond agreement. Just sets out how the airport board will request the county to issue bonds. It states in there that while the airport board can recommend consultants for the county board to hire, since they are the experts in that area, but the consultants will still be hired by the county. They are our bonds, they will be our consultants. For example, in this deal, you recently hired Kevin McPeak from PFM, who was recommended by the airport board, but again, he's your consultant. We will have one more consultant we will need to hire as a board, and that will be for the airport consultant to write the consultant's report for the official statement. And then, of course, there's covenants in there. The timetable right now, we've given this to the airport board last week. We have a meeting set for April 5th where we will go through it with them. After we receive their comments, then we're going to take it to the Underwriters Council so we can get their comments. And then once we have everybody's comments, then we'll bring it back to the board to look at that for your comments as well. And then eventually we will get that adopted. We are hoping to have everything in place by June 1st. Once we have everything in place, Deanna and her crew will start putting a shell of the preliminary official statement together, so that right now I know the airport board is thinking of, Rob, I don't know if this has changed, but the airport board was thinking of potentially second quarter of next year. But we want to have this in place that if they want to go earlier, if the market gets hot or whatever, interest rates go down, if they want to pull the trigger earlier, we want to have some stuff ready so that maybe we can shorten the lead time. So then the next step, it'll kind of go on pause until the airport board is ready to request a series bond resolution from us, and then it will come back to the commissioners to start the issuance of bonds and go through that process. Did I miss anything, Deanna?
Covered it.
Any questions?
No questions?
So again, we're just trying to get everything in place.
We're trying to get everything
so that
in
we can
place. We're hoping to get everything in place by the 1st of June. That way, whenever the airport and the airport board is ready to go, we'll be ready to go also and speed up the process.
So, is this just for a new commissioner's edification? The master bond, we haven't really done that, a master bond resolution before. Is this giving us an opportunity to not have to do individual bonding for different projects? Or how is this different than how we've done stuff in the past?
Deanna, yeah.
I'd be happy to answer
Yeah,
that.
please.
The master bond resolution serves as almost an umbrella for all the revenue bonds that are issued by the county on behalf of the airport. And so it sets out the covenants to bondholders and the relationship between the county and bondholders. And then so it really will cover all the bonds going forward. And it's really the meat of what bondholders are relying on in terms of the pledge and the covenants and all the various bells and whistles that go along from the bondholder perspective. With each series, there'll be a separate short and sweet series resolution, and that's the second part that was mentioned. So when the airport board requests that the county issues bonds, there'll be a short and sweet series resolution, but it will be very lean to that deal and that specific project. All of those overriding terms that you would see from a revenue bond standpoint
all in that master
all in that
document.
master.
Okay.
Yep.
And it gives them much more flexibility as far as types
Yes.
of debt that they can request the county
Exactly.
to
It
issue.
has a lot of
Great.
flexibility built in within that revenue structure.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Cover that while you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very kind.
Okay, so then, just right on time. So, Matt, you're here. Kyle, I don't know if you want to kick it off?
Sure thing. We are coming back around. This has to do with the small arms range and the EVOC track for that. As some of you may, as the board members, the new board members may not know, a portion of the small, or not a portion of the small arms range is being built on county road department property. We've already done the property transfer and sale for the actual facility. This is an additional component of property out here that is owned by the road fund for their EVOC training course.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. Thank you for the time to brief you on this. It will be brief briefing. Picture up there, you can see this is some property. The existing Spokane County maintenance shop for our West District, it's District 3 is the number we use, is in orange there in the top left, right at the intersection of Craig and 902. And you can see we have the big piece south where it says County Pit. We have a large area for future mining activity, production of gravel and chips for our chip sealing program, in essence, is what we use them for. And over the years, we've kind of taken off portions of it for other needs inside the county. We have the EDU, the explosion area for folks if they need to detonate devices, which we hope doesn't come up all the time. But they've used that top right corner there in purple for that for a very long time now. And then directly to the east of that, you can see the new shooting range area just on the other side of a driveway or a little right of way there. And then the new area we're talking about transferring to the sheriff's department is the area in red, and they call it the EVOC track. It's a driver training track for emergency personnel, mainly the sheriff's office. And we talked a long time ago, next slide please. And Melky and I worked through pricing it and came up with $1.75 a square foot, which after hearing the airport say $4.74, I feel like we're a bargain at that $1.74. And it's about 17.25 acres. The cost of the acquisition, basically the transfer from the sheriff's project to our road fund, would be $1.3 million at that price. Any questions?
So this was already considered within the cost of the small arms range, right?
Yes.
The 40 million.
Yep.
Price tag.
I believe we have $3 million set aside for thereabouts in the small arms range budget. So this would be a portion of that.
Because then it's to purchase and
Build it out. Correct.
develop it.
Correct.
Okay.
On this map, Madam Chair, question about the small arms range. Who owns the property around the small arms range?
I believe.
So anything outside of that orange, kind of brownish line
Yep.
is private owned. Okay. So the county just owns within that boundary. Okay.
Basically, everything that has a color shaded area in here is owned by the county. Everything that's outside, except for the teal line, whatever color that is. Yeah, right, Matt?
Yeah, that's correct. All the county ownership is
What's that?
shown in color.
The teal are just your standard
Yes,
property lines.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And so is there a current EVOC track that this will replace?
The sheriff's department has been using the Raceway Park, which was previously owned by the county and now is owned by the Kalispell tribe. So I think they're still somewhat using that today. This would get them off of it and have it next to their training center and small arms range.
So it's all the training kind of right there together.
So the remainder of the budget would be to develop the track?
Correct.
Okay. Yep. And we're confident that the remainder will be able to do that after paying for the property?
They have a budget to
Okay.
do it. I think they will have to make sure they're managing to that budget as to what's going to be included in the
Or they could use any leftover funds from the small arms range to do that. They can move that around.
I don't, from what I understand, the EVOC track is more of a conceptualized, it hasn't been designed yet. So we don't have a really good, the Sheriff's Department doesn't have a really good estimate of what it would take to build that. That's why we put a placeholder in the budget for it.
And we don't see it impacting long-term the needs of our roads department there.
Yeah, before we took this area out, the estimated pit life in terms of mining it out inside of our existing permit was over 50 years, and we have a lot of pit sites. So this is a permitted
This is
one that
just
has.
one of several.
Right.
Okay.
We have them scattered all over the county, as you might imagine, from being here for a very long time, and it's not gonna impact our program, would be the short answer. We can afford to lose that area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that's gonna take us to Kat and Justin.
Yes, didn't know if Kat wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am here, but I thought Justin was going to be here to brief, and I do not see him. Is he there with you?
Oh, no, he's here with us.
I'm in the room,
Oh,
Kat.
perfect.
Just wanted to
Perfect.
make sure you weren't doing the lead up for it.
Very good.
No, that's all right. This is all Justin. He's my subject matter expert here.
Perfect, then we will let Justin take it away. Thank you.
So this is just an update to a contract amendment to an existing service we briefed the board on just late last year. And it actually came in our contract with stipulations in the January amendment that was approved, but they didn't give us the money until later. So this is what you're seeing now. The contract amendment will add an additional amount of funding for the MRSS grant. This is from SAMHSA that expands and enhances youth mobile outreach services for our Spokane County region only. And really this adds, it was initially identified for a 10-member team, but in negotiations with Healthcare Authority and the funding allotment, managed care organizations have determined they don't want to or will not extend the stabilization service coverage that we initially been in discussion with. So we are looking at reducing the team to the 6-member because now it'll only be funded under this System of Care grant, SOC, that the SAMHSA has identified. So the funding has not changed from SAMHSA, just the total member team and breakout of the program. This will be attached to our existing crisis system. So it'll further enhance our children, youth, and family mobile crisis team that's already in place. The goal for this program is to extend ongoing follow-up and care with youth. So generally the crisis system looks at a 72-hour window. This will extend it up to 14 days. And then that's how much Medicaid will cover, and then up to 52 days thereafter, dependent upon the needs of the family, thus reducing the overall acute care inpatient hospital needs that we find. Any youth in Spokane County and or family is open to receive this service and expanded care. Again, really looking at when a crisis occurs and continuing engagement so that we prevent hospitalization and further crisis involvement. So that is what we're requesting the board approve, is the amendment to extend or to accept the contracted funds for this period.
Who are some of the organizations then that staff the team? Just curious, like it's interesting that they have the peer support specialists. Are those teens themselves that are like peer supports or?
So the contract is through Frontier Behavioral Health. That's what the state designated as the provider. And it's really because they provide the crisis services for Spokane County. The peers that have been identified will be individuals who have graduated and have experienced that through their young years. So it'll be 18-year-old or older.
But they've had an experience.
Exactly. They'll have lived experience. The state wants us to focus on parent peers as well, to engage with them. And so that seems to be another focus we'll be looking at. Really, it's about who can we get to hire. Right now, the challenge with the workforce is finding the available individuals that don't or not currently within their journey of recovery that would have a significant issue is always an impact when looking at peers. And I believe there was a question too that had been raised regarding the impact to existing MHPs because of the workforce. And we were able to identify that this team will be primarily comprised of MHCPs or bachelor's level. So the impact to MHPs and any impact to our the ability to hire for our BHU unit will also not be affected. The goal really here is to look at available workforce and not impact other individuals that need that staffing support at the master's level. So in that way, it's kind of insulated from impacting it.
And this will be on Frontier to be hiring the individuals.
That's correct, yeah.
Because so we're just passing through, we're getting the contract from the state and then for the grant and then sending that out to Frontier.
That's correct, yes. I envision they'll end up taking staff from their existing outpatient behavioral health, which is unfortunate. But again, if we hope to front end the engagement, then we won't necessarily need the further more intensity services later. That's the hope.
So the idea is, like what you're saying, I guess Medicaid only funds up to a certain point. And so this extends the funding, it creates another funding source that continues to support the child and family beyond that 14 days.
Yes, well.
Without having to go back in the hospital and start all over again.
So yes and no.
Maybe I'm way simplifying it, I'm sure.
It is. So it's complicated and this is the world that I had to delve into. There's certain SERI codes or HCPCS codes that you report for services provided. And the code for this one is S9484. That can be done in a facility for stabilization or in the community, home-based stabilization. Okay. We're requesting the home-based. However, Medicaid does cover up to 14 days. So we wanted Medicaid to cover a portion of it. The managed care organizations indicated that they did not believe the state should free up that contract to allow them to do that. So they unilaterally rejected covering the extension of the S9484 in-home to us, saying they would maintain it, even though they don't have any contracts for that in our region currently, and said to the state, well, just use your grant to pay for it. We had hoped for them to pay a portion, and then we would then extend it. And so non-Medicaid individuals, remember 40% is commercial insurance, and of those, about, 20% are duly enrolled. So we really wanted to extend it, and we wanted it all to go through one. We would funnel it, do all the work like we normally do, but they would have to pay their proportionate share. They chose not to. They're still doing the crisis service, H2011s. They just didn't want to extend it. And it's been 4 or 5 months I've been fighting with them. And they just decided, the state did, to just say, you can just use the grant to cover it, even though Medicaid also covers it. So it's frustrating turnout, but we're going to proceed forward and not harm, in my view, the residents of Spokane County. They need to receive the service regardless, and I can figure out the rest in making Medicaid pay for it later.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation.
Are there any other similar models in the state to this structure of trying to get upstream? And
yes, not in. This was a model that was taken from New Jersey. So they're doing this program. It's very effective on the East Coast. The state looked at a pilot through SAMHSA, and so Beacon Health Options and Pierce is the only one else doing this. We've extended that and enhanced our existing one because they didn't have the same level of children, youth, and family that we have. So we were already doing it, so that's the benefit to our region. We're just enhancing it and further extending that service for youth and families. So are there? Yes, I would argue we're doing it better.
Yeah. I'm not surprised to hear that.
It's been a challenge in the state to get that additional funding, and I would argue that this whole grant just makes it more difficult. To be quite frank, reporting requirements are significant, but in essence, what we're doing is further upstream and is a benefit to preventing inpatient hospitalizations.
Thanks for your work.
Yes.
And efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so then on Mr. Amicio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've asked Rebecca to place on the overhead only one element with regard to my PowerPoint, because I think it's easier for me to give you some background information and then look at page 3 of the resolution that Rebecca will place on the overhead. This is simply a technical change, if you will, to the Board of County Commissioners previous resolution which they adopted changing the composition of the Spokane Regional Health District. As the board is aware, in 2021, the legislature adopted ESBB 1152. And that particular legislation required all counties to modify the composition of their health districts. The modification would, for all practical purposes, provide that there would not be more elected officials on the health board than non-elected officials. Consistent with that directive, the Board of County Commissioners adopted resolution number 210791. And under that resolution, the Board of County Commissioners established an 8-member Board of Health. The 8-member Board of Health that was created and that is in existence consists of 3 county commissioners, 1 person appointed from an elected official from a city or town appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, 3 other non-elected officials who have to have certain disciplines, and the final person is from the American Indian Health Commission. So that comprised the 4 individuals composing the Spokane Regional Health Board. The Board of County Commissioners provided for the new composition of the Health Board before the effective date of that law. The effective date of the new law was July 1st, 2022. The county commissioners put in place this health board on December 31st, 2021. So we were ahead of the curve. Bill 1152, in addition to requiring the composition of the health board so there would be as many elected officials as non-elected officials, also requires that the resolution establishing the composition include the following language. The local health officer shall be appointed by the official designated under the provisions of the resolution. Let me say that one more time. The legislation requires that the resolution that the Board of County Commissioners revised with regard to the composition of the health board also include language which addresses what local official is going to designate the health officer. And the same resolution can also identify the local official who shall designate the health administrator. As the Board of County Commissioners presently know, the Spokane Regional Health District is in the process of hiring a new health administrator. So in this regard, we want to be sure that the County Commissioners resolution setting up the health district identifies the official responsible for appointing the health administrator. And the interesting thing here is that the legislation didn't say it could be a board, it said it should be an official. And so with respect to that change in the law, legal counsel has proposed legislation, which Rebecca has on the screen, where the Board of County Commissioners, on the consent agenda, would modify the resolution establishing the new composition of the health board to address the responsible official who will appoint, if you will, the health administrator and the health officer. And the language which I have come up with after coordinating the language with the health district is on the resolution identified on page 3, and it would provide as follows. The chair of the Spokane Regional Health District Board shall be the official designated to appoint the local health officer as described in 7005-050, based upon a majority vote from the Spokane Regional Health District Board of Health. So as far as the health officer is concerned, the Board of Health would make a recommendation to the chair of the health board, and then that person would appoint the person who is recommended by majority vote. With regard to the administrative officer, which is the position which they're presently thinking about filling, the language is the same. It says that the chair of the Spokane Regional Health District Board shall be the official designated to appoint the administrative officer as described in 7005-045, based upon a majority vote from the Spokane Regional Health District Board. So the Spokane Regional Health District Board, on page 3 of the resolution, would make a recommendation to the chair of the Health District Board, and then that person would appoint the health administrator, and the same language would deal with the health officer. Now, in this particular case, the health officer was hired before the effective date of this new law. So the present appointee to that position would not necessarily be subject to this new language, but down the road, when the health board goes to potentially hire a new health officer, this language would apply. So, and Rebecca, can I have you please go to the slide, and can you pull up the last slide before questions, because on the overhead, it shows the language which I'm proposing the Board of County Commissioners consider. That's the first slide. There's a second slide. There we go. That's the language, board members, which I am proposing the Board of County Commissioners adopt by resolution on your next consent agenda to address the legislation that was passed in 2021 under 1152.
And just to clarify, this has gone through Michelle Fossum, who's the attorney for the health district, to make sure that we're in coordination with that and that the health district bylaws.
That's correct, Commissioner CUNY. I did talk with the attorney for the health board to be sure that I wasn't running afoul of anything that was in their bylaws. And what I learned is the attorney is very comfortable with this language. And if once the board passes this language, then the health district board will modify their bylaws so it's consistent with this language. So I'm sorry, it's simpler than it sounds. The bottom line is simply the Board of County Commissioners, because we established the health board, we have to identify the responsible official who appoints the health officer and the health administrator. And that was a change in the law from what existed previously. Are there any questions with regard to my recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners?
Is it possible just to get, sorry, it's a little confusing, just like a redlined version with the additional language put into the current resolution?
Section B.
Yeah, but it's like,
If you go to
it
now,
doesn't follow the rest. If this is a resolution, it goes from D to V.
No, I know, but I'll be glad to take
So-
that resolution for you, Commissioner, and highlight in gray the new language which we're adding to our resolution and make it very simple. I'll get it to all the board members.
Right, because that language is not the same as in V.
Yeah,
It's slightly different the way it's worded.
Okay,
it'd be good if I could I noticed
see
that
it.
too, yes.
Okay.
No, the
Okay, I
PowerPoint is
apologize.
slightly
Thank
different than the resolution.
thank you for catching it, but I will give you that and I'll highlight it in gray so it's very clear.
Yeah, just to see the addition or change versus in the
resolutions-
context of the whole resolution.
Right.
Yeah,
The resolution's a little long, Commissioner, because you have to
You're
tell
trying
the
to save some
story
trees,
so
okay.
people know why we're doing what we're doing and when we're doing it.
I get what you're trying to do. It would just be good for me to see the whole resolution since I'm on the Board of Health anyway.
Oh, that's
To
right,
understand
you
the
are
context.
the third member,
So,
the
yes.
new member. That's correct. Yes.
Thanks.
I'll get that to you right away, and then unless I hear anything to the contrary, Madam Chair, I will have the clerk place this on next Tuesday's regular agenda as a consent item.
I have a question. How was the current health officer appointed? Was there an official
Yeah.
at that time designated or?
Well,
Vote of the board,
It was a
right?
vote of the board.
Just
yeah.
majority?
I've got, yeah,
It's because the Board of County Commissioners really didn't have any effect. We were just board members of the health board until change that, so.
He was hired before this bill.
That is correct.
The changes went into effect.
That is correct. And Commissioner CUNY, you are exactly correct. I've got the bylaws of the health district, and with regard to the administrator, the Board of Health shall appoint the administrator. With regard to the health officer, the bylaws provide, the administrator shall recommend appointment of a person to be the health officer to the Board of Health. The Board of Health shall approve or reject the administrator's recommendation. So that's the language which would be modified to be consistent with the language which I'm proposing the board adopt. Because remember, the way the law was changed, for whatever reason, the legislature said, instead, there must be a responsible official. And so that's why we have to make the change, Commissioner CUNY. And unfortunately, I was involved when we modified the language on the composition, but we overlooked this. We were so concerned about getting the composition correct, consistent with the unique language in the RCW, we overlooked this particular language. So I'll get that to you, Commissioner Waldrop. I apologize for the confusion. Any other questions that I can answer? Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's gonna take us to Lieutenant Elliott. We're gonna have you come up and talk to us about the Real Crime Center project overview.
Yes. Give you a few moments or get right in.
I think you could just go ahead and just a second, just because I know if there's any mumbling, it is very loud on the screen, so. Okay, I think we're ready to go, thank you.
All right. Good morning, my name is Justin Elliott, Lieutenant with the Sheriff's Office, assigned to the Regional Intelligence Group 9 in the Investigative Division. And for those that are present for previous discussions, some of this is a review from the ARPA proposal, and also with the new commissioners provide some additional information, and for everybody where we're at now and going forward. So the county had approved the nearly $4 million ARPA Real-Time Crime Center at the end of last year, and we've been working on moving that project forward since then. Spokane Valley City is also approved and has in place $850,000 of ARPA funding. Some of that has already been spent on some technological improvements. Additionally, they're aiming at about $500 to $600 in CCTV cameras around the new City Center Balfour Park, the trail, the Appleway Trail, and several of the parks throughout the city. So we've got a dual project here where we're supporting that. We're buying tech through their funds and also setting up our regional real-time crime center. What we come to realize since getting those funds approved is that the large scope of this project, including construction and additional tech systems, additional full-time employees, and on, has created a level of work that mistakes would be much easier to be made. And one mistake could be several $100,000s on a project of this size. Therefore, through the Real-Time Crime Center Association and kind of the national industry, there's over 200 real-time crime centers in the US right now. And for a community our size, it's important that we get up to speed with technology and our responses to lower crime. There's a recommendation that we need to have a consultant come in and give a real in-depth assessment of where we're at, what we have already, which is a lot more than we might think we have, how we can bring that in, and how we can bring other agencies in to partner in this, not only to be successful on the front end, but also to fund this after the end of the ARPA funds through our partner agencies and other avenues. So I did not include a large PowerPoint with a bunch of information, but to keep it simple, the original executive summary that was approved by the commissioners at the end of 2022. The budget snapshot on there is changing considerably as we get consultant information involved about what type of tech, what type of vendors we need to go with. The mere fact that we went through this consultant process and we came out with a competitive process that selected Federal Engineering. Goes to show you that the only one consultant I was aware of at the time when we started this was the number 2. And this vendor came out and showed that they did consulting for similar size agencies that were county based. And although it was about twice the cost of the first consultant we were looking at, it's also twice, the product, what we're seeing, also twice the duration. I would point out the Gantt chart. I'm not sure if I just got information that I was presenting on this on Friday, so pardon me. Essentially a Gantt chart that shows the timeline of the services they would provide. It starts with February 20th, so we're about a month behind that. So imagine we probably bumped that up about a month. And as we go through this, we'll get a much clearer idea of what that budget timeline would look like and when we're going to acquire certain things. So again, just by doing a consultant search, a competitive process, we identified a different vendor that meets our needs. I see that that's going to happen at several different levels of this project because the tech world is, you buy something today, it's obsolete tomorrow, and keeping us flexible and making sure that we are getting the right products that work well with the other products we have locally. We're a unique agency in that, or we're a unique county in that most of our law enforcement agencies are on the same CAD system. It's not normal throughout the US, so that's an advantageous aspect for us. The consultant, Federal Engineering, would be providing a team of 5 to 6 individuals to work with our project manager. We just brought on a project manager through HR this last week, Eric Green, through SkillBridge, which gives us 6 months of state-funded project manager salary, which initially we had budgeted for about $100,000 for a project manager, realizing later it's probably on the low end for the industry standard. So that might extend our budget and timeline by another 6 months to about 18, which gives us the ability to have some good direction as we go forward. We need to have, obviously, this all encumbered by the end of 2024, which further enhances the need for a consultant to come in and basically architect our program on a budget and planning level so that we are set for 24 through 26, because we're not going to have the ability to do a lot of budgetary changes in there. A few points before I open up for any questions is, if you're not familiar with the Real-Time Crime Center, I have the 2 consultant proposals available. This will increase our situational awareness. We'll be able to react on actionable data, brings together video, incident, criminal data, license plate reader information, photos, national databases, 911 calls, and the people sitting there, our operators, will be proactively responding to not only calls for service, but checking high crime areas, videos we already have, and maybe trying to detect crime that's happening before it's reported. And additionally, being virtually on scene long before an officer can be on scene, therefore affecting our response times. And the main deliverables being to lower overall violent crime in the Spokane area by a significant amount through this community violence intervention program. And one little point, we were able to get access to the Valley traffic cameras through the traffic management system and the Valley City Hall. We were able to record on our own VMS law enforcement system because they don't record. And a woman was hit and killed by a hit and run driver about 3 weeks ago, if you remember the case. Luckily, the cameras that we had just gotten in place were able to get an image of that collision occurring, and a detective recognized the vehicle, and that 16-year-old individual who hit and killed her was located, and the case was closed, and it wouldn't have been closed without that video. And it would probably still be a cold case. So I could go on and on with some of our other wins, but to keep it brief, any questions?
So, and this is all part of when you have events, you have the trailer that goes out.
Yes. This, in addition to, being an intelligence dispatch type of function, as we have planned events, community events, if we have protests, we have a national disaster, this Real-Time Crime Center would also work as kind of, I like to describe it as a mini EOC at a lower law enforcement level, where we can collaborate with other agencies, share information, and also work with some of these tech systems we have the ability to have a real-time crime center in the cloud, and we can work from a mobile command post and meet that function.
Thank you. I just want to make sure, I thought that was part of this as well, so.
So this is new, so I'm digging in and getting some, but thank you for all the background and the presentation from, this is another community in Florida.
Yes.
Put together.
They're very similar size to the Valley, different crime rate and officer population, but very good outcomes using these principles.
So what you've come to is that hiring that consultant to help set up this whole, and identify the assets that we already have and how those would work together, that's what you're presenting, that's what the next step is?
Correct.
that you'd like
We
to
believe it's imperative.
Spend the funding toward.
We're building this new Palace, which is a law enforcement tech system. And in building the foundation of that building before we start, putting cameras in the field sometimes is like, the roof and the shingles of the building, is identifying an architect to come in and plan from building from start to finish, and have that project manager that we're bringing on be kind of like the foreman that helps us keep the building on task and going forward. So yes, we look at them as an imperative body now to help us plan out that going forward, because the timelines are extremely important, especially with renovation and construction on the second floor of the public safety building. A lot of this program can't go forward until those timelines are set. We have to wait to have the ability to put people in there, so then the hiring changes. So yes, the recommendation is to verify our selection of federal engineering through a competitive RFP selection process, to be awarded that and begin as soon as possible.
So all these different cameras that the different jurisdictions have been purchasing, like you're talking about the Valley and the city of Spokane, would they all feed to this center then? You could get that data if you were pursuing a potential criminal activity?
Yes, ideally, because as a regional real-time crime center, partnerships are extremely important, and that we're sharing that information. So the idea would be to pull in as much available and important video feeds as possible, which brings MOUs between the agencies, connectivity issues. As you add feeds, the costs of the video management centers go up. So it all further supports the need for the consultant to help us write those MOUs and identify what costs can be involved by adding the additional agencies, which is all stuff to us that was not a section in the academy. So learning how to integrate technology, I'm learning as we go, and we need some experts.
So the renovations on the second floor will be creating this space or IT hub where you'd have this, how many folks would you be looking at FTEs?
To run at a part-time level, we've identified that full-time would be 6 to 8 persons, which we're not at a point where we're ready to support that overall. But 3 FTEs as an operators, and additional FTE, which would be 4 for the IT systems integration tech, a systems manager, which is extremely important to keep all this stuff going. So yes, the additional 4 FTEs is part of this project.
So have you spoken with the Spokane Police Department about, coordination and their interest in maybe contributing to the project as well?
Absolutely. I actually presented to their command staff last week. They're already aware of what we've been doing this project's been going on for at least 18 months that I've been involved pushing it forward strongly. Very positive response. I think their concern is FTEs like anybody else. And I said, hey, we're in the sandbox here. Do you want to come play it all? The door is open. It makes sense. We're dealing with the same individuals, the same citizens that need help, and a seamless transition and response would make sense. And I said, if it's helping with information systems, because they're parallel in their TARU and their information systems out purchasing different VMSs, and they're getting license plate reader type of stuff. They're getting gunshot detection. And I think it's important that we stay in contact and use similar systems so that we can integrate.
Right, so they can talk to each other. Right.
And that's been really positive lately, very positive. And and what I left them with was, even if it's somebody on light duty that wants to come in and learn the systems and assist, we'd be open to that.
And you're already working with the city of Spokane on a joint task force for, I think under the old sheriff, it was already set up to work with the city of Spokane for violent crimes.
Yes,
I mean,
they
we
still,
just
they have a full-time violent crimes task force attached to their major crimes unit. And we have been working with them, started under Sheriff Knezovich. At this time, it's not directly active with our staffing, but we hope that this, like I said, it's in here somewhere. But the idea is as this gets rolling, like a violent crimes task force would almost be directly attached to the real-time crime center and be driven by the information they're getting. If it's tracking, if it's current information, surveillance, and to be able to kind of the label we're putting on this entire program is precision policing. Is what we're aiming at, is that we're using technology to be able to identify specifically the person, the vehicle, the location that we're looking at, as opposed to the old way of throwing the net and everything that else that comes in it sometimes is people not involved in crime. And we go out and we saturate an area and we make contacts mostly good, but we get some not so good ones out of that as well. So by particularizing our efforts, we hope we can be more efficient on many levels.
One last, I like that you have these outcomes that is that?
More ambitious than others?
Yes. So really, the focus of this approach is focused deterrence. It's once a violent crime occurs, you get on that, you hopefully prosecute, you get the information, you get justice for the victim, through the court process. But in terms of the police department or sheriff's department, you are gonna have a much more proactive approach once that violent crime occurs. And is the theory then that will deter other violent criminals in the community because that person was held accountable for the crime? I mean, basically, is that what we're getting at? It's deterring crime because maybe you are able to get a clear case to the court about what happened with that particular crime.
Sure. I mean, similar to what we're doing with the fentanyl crisis right now, we're attacking overdose homicide, treating them as homicides so that dealers know that, if their customers die, that they're potentially looking at a lot of years in prison. That can be a deterrent.
Right.
Deterrence doesn't always work for every criminal. It's kind of particularized by the individual. But by getting there on the front end, evidence is very perishable, electronic, physical evidence, et cetera. And the sooner that we can gather that, identify it, preserve it, the likelihood for prosecution, if it's deterrence because they're incarcerated and the recidivism isn't possible because we were able to get a good case, the money saved by giving the prosecutor's office a much more solid case, it gets pled out and we avoid going to trial. Stopping a crime spree on the front end mitigates all the other crimes that were going to happen later in that day because you had a real-time crime center or you had somebody that was coordinating that. And down to the amount of time and effort it takes to follow up on investigations. It's hard to put a price tag on that, but we've tried to show that the sooner that you get intervention, the better. And officers on the street have so many things that they have to juggle, and we only have so many, that this is a way that we can help accomplish that with the tools that we have already.
So it's an intervention tactic, not necessarily prevention, but which you don't say here, but there's different tactics, there's prevention, so this is kind of the intervention approach. Do we have evidence from other communities that they've been able to reduce gun violence, assaults, and property crime by a certain percentage once they've put this into place?
Yes. Attached to the
Florida one.
Yeah, that's one example. There's a myriad of examples of crime rates that, depending on how, there's several different ways you can employ a real-time crime center. You can do it kind of part-time attached to your crime analysis unit. You can do it in your investigation. There's so many different models. So those outcomes, I don't want to speak to them, but I haven't seen an example where it didn't work when they employed it in a specific way and were proactive about it. And police action in a crime is always going to be intervention. It's just a matter of what point, If we have a crime on Friday night, we have a murder, we have a drive-by shooting, and nobody gets to investigate it until Monday morning, we're intervening on the back end. We're starting to actually take action. But if we can intervene on Friday night, is there an additional drive-by that occurs? Is there evidence lost? So the contemporaneousness of the action, But I think that deterrence is important. You know, the valley wants to have blue lights on all their cameras. They want it to be known that there's a camera there. We want to disperse those crimes. So to answer your question, yes, intervention, I think it's just more of in what point of the crime do you intervene? And what about the crimes we don't even investigate because we didn't have that evidence that now we have through the tech, through the license plate reads, through the video, that wouldn't even get followed up on.
Thank you. This was, you know, definitely the new sheriff. This was very much what he was pushing for, you know, and so that was part of where the three commissioners at the time put money into the ARP money into really helping this get up and going. You know, because we see it as it's kind of the new way of looking at things as these new flock cameras are coming into the community. I know I was just talking to Mayor Liberty Lake, and they are really happy with theirs, you know, out there. So it's a great thing. So excited to see what can happen with this.
There'll be a lot in the next 12 months, and I believe we'll have quarterly reports to keep everyone abreast.
So the action is the consultant is coming forward before the commissioners on the consent agenda, the contract.
Yeah, it'll be on next.
And what's that total contract amount? So,
109,000 and change, I believe.
okay, is that in the documents here?
Not in the documents I dispersed, I believe, but it's in, I assume they came from purchasing already. That you know,
Okay, so 109,000, that covers, it looks like 6 months worth of.
about that, almost or more than that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Which is
9
already
months.
within their budget.
Right,
It's
right.
just the contract has to come before us. So-
Got it.
So, and again, with it being a separate allotment.
And my original budget was based off of the FTEs and everything being purchased January 1 of this year. So the offset is the salary side and everything else that we haven't hit the ground running yet. We're not incurring any of those budget impacts yet. So we're comfortable this will fit in and we can make adjustments and it'll be feasible.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, so then that will take us to, since we already did Randy's discussion, any miscellaneous matters coming before the board?
It does appear a couple weeks ago when we had the big snowstorm, we were going to have a group of students that were gonna come through. They'll be coming through tomorrow, I guess. So they're starting at the city. When they do that, they're gonna tour some other electeds offices here at the county, but they're gonna sit in through our consent agenda at 2. So just a heads up, there will be a group of students out in the audience.
Can you just give me a little blurb so I can welcome them if I open up the meeting?
Yeah, nothing I've seen has had the name of the school, just that there will be a group of students.
Want to recognize them since they're
Yeah.
coming down and taking the time to do that, so, yes. Okay. So then Scott, any other items?
On to exec session, we
Okay.
have 2 for pending and potential litigation.
Okay, and so Chris, I will let you state our purpose and reasons and who will be in attendance.
Yes, so we have 2 matters to brief for pending potential litigation under RCW 423110-1I. The first one is going to involve Matt Koza from our office, of course, the board, as well as Scott Simmons. The second will involve Jim Amacio. I don't believe Jessica Pilgrim is going to be able to make that one, and then myself as well.
Then I would, on the first matter, have Kyle Tuig join us with our exec team. And the second matter, have Mike Sparber join us.
And how long do you anticipate for each of those?
I believe approximately 10 minutes for the first one and 15 for the second.
And then at that point, then we will use any action plan.
No action necessary today, potentially follow at a later date.
So then we would adjourn at that point in time.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna go into executive session for the 2 items discussed.
sorry, Commissioner Cheney, I would like to add Jessica Kilby to that second item sheet. I think she moved it out of her previous meeting, so.
Okay, so we're gonna go into executive session for pending potential litigation. We have two items. One is will be for 10 minutes, no action determined that will happen. The second one is for 15 minutes, again, pending potential litigation, no action is anticipated. So after the 25 minutes, we will adjourn. In the first one will be Matt Koza, Kyle Tuig, the commissioners, and Scott Simmons, and Chris Anderson. The second one will be Jim Amacio, Mike Sparber, Jessica Pilgrim, Chris Anderson, and the commissioners, and Scott Simmons. And it is 10:36, so we will adjourn at 11:01. Thank you.